Latrell Sprewell. The day everything snapped. Latrell Sprewell was having one of the strongest stretches of his career in Golden State, averaging 21.4 points, 4.9 assists, and 1.7 steals in the season leading up to the infamous practice. His role was never quiet. He carried a young roster through stretches where his shot selection made coaches uneasy and his competitiveness made teammates fall in line. However, the turning point came during an ordinary practice session in 1997. Carlesimo pushed him about passing accuracy. This was a routine correction that spiraled instantly. Teammates who were around narrated the ordeal as Sprewell stepped forward, with his arms locking around Carlesimo's neck, while players rushed from every corner of the gym. But when they successfully separated the two, the atmosphere stayed rigid, only for Sprewell to return some minutes later and throw a punch. Just as you already know, the NBA doesn't joke with her conduct, so the league responded with a 68-game suspension, one of the longest non-drug bans in NBA history. Golden State wasn't left out with the sanction. They went on to void his contract. That's not all. National coverage also painted him as the face of player volatility, even when he resurfaced in New York and helped the Knicks reach the 1999 Finals, averaging 26.0 points per game in the Eastern Conference Finals. The shadow of that practice scenario never left. Every comeback moment felt like a reminder of what he could have been without the outburst. Sprewell's game stayed explosive, his endurance unmatched, and his late-game scoring still dangerous. But none of it outshined the incident. Sprewell's career kept moving forward, yet the defining snapshot remained the one moment he lost control in a practice that wasn't even televised. Rasheed Wallace, the whistle that followed him everywhere. Rasheed Wallace is that player who gets into games with a skill set that stretches well beyond his temper. Through his prime in Portland, he averaged 16 to 19 points, had around 7 rebounds, and shot efficiently from mid-range before big guys regularly stepped out to the arc. But the controversy shaping his legacy wasn't his scoring or defense. It was the technical fouls that trailed him like a second stat line. The 2000 to 2001 season cemented everything for Wallace. He put up 19.2 points and 7.8 rebounds, but the more famous number was his 41 technical fouls, a record that still stands untouched. Not all of them came from yelling. Some resulted from a sarcastic clap, a raised eyebrow, or a stare at referees, which gets interpreted as escalating tension. Several officials of the game later went on to admit they called techs early with Wallace, while anticipating trouble even before it happened. For Wallace, the game shifted around him. It was always a case of clean block, which could become a tech if his reaction lingered for more seconds. And the fans? They debated whether he was targeted or whether he invited the chaos through how intensely he reacted to officiating. However, Detroit embraced him anyway, and during the Pistons' 2004 championship run, Wallace anchored the defense, shot 50% from the field, and guarded bigs who outweighed him. His intensity fueled the team more than it damaged them. Still, the controversy followed him everywhere, and it mostly overshadowed everything about him. Royce White, the battle with a system not built for him. Royce White's game was unusual for a forward. At Iowa State, he averaged 13.4 points, 9.3 rebounds, and 5.0 assists, numbers that made scouts compare him to oversized point guards. His ability to push full court, pass through traffic, and overpower smaller defenders made him a first-round pick, and that was his advantage. But his anxiety disorder, especially concerning air travels, collided immediately with the NBA's structure. White expected the franchise to build clear mental health protocols. However, Houston expected him to adjust. The gap between those expectations turned into national controversy. He requested written plans outlining treatment availability, emergency responses during travel, and consistent access to mental health. Unfortunately, these were ideas the league wouldn't fully implement until years later. While the standoff unfolded, White showed glimpses of his potential in the G League. In Rio Grande Valley, he posted 9.6 points, 5.6 rebounds, and 3.3 assists in limited minutes. Coaches saw a player who could initiate offense from any spot on the floor, but his conflict with the franchise overshadowed everything he did on the court. His story grew publicly as statements moved back and forth. Some labeled him difficult. Others saw a rookie pushing the league into modern mental health awareness. Eventually, his NBA window closed before he could secure a full role. White's career didn't collapse because of skill. His game was absolutely NBA ready. White controversy came from challenging an infrastructure that wasn't prepared to treat mental health like any other injury. Years later, the league adopted many policies he advocated for, long after his career was gone. Nick Van Exel, the push that shifted a career. Nick Van Exel spent most nights balancing between control and unpredictability. In his early Lakers years, he averaged 15 to 17 points, spread the floor with deep threes, and created angles defenders didn't expect. He was indeed a classic player. His confidence made him dangerous late in games, but it also steered him into the controversy that has followed him ever since. During a tight matchup in 1996, frustration with officiating built possession after possession. Van Exel felt a missed call cost them momentum, and the argument with referee Ron Gerritsen escalated fast. Their exchange moved from midcourt to the sideline, where Van Exel suddenly shoved Gerritsen into the scorer's table. The arena froze, players backed away, and the broadcast commentary turned silent for several seconds as officials gathered themselves. The league suspended him for 7 games and fined him heavily. The Lakers distanced themselves publicly, even though he was still giving them 7.3 assists per game, running the offense with a rhythm nobody else on the roster matched. The fallout pushed the franchise to consider a long-term direction that eventually replaced Van Exel with more structured guard play. When Van Exel resurfaced in Denver and later Dallas, he remained productive, especially in the Mavericks' 2003 playoff run, where he averaged 19.5 points off the bench. Despite his ability, the shove never fully evaporated from conversations about his career. J.R. Rider, talent overshadowed by turbulence. J.R. Rider's rookie season included 16.6 points per game, the East Bay Funk dunk, and stretches where he looked like the next dominant wing scorer. But every step forward came with a controversy waiting behind it, and the most defining one erupted during his Minnesota years. Rider's conflict with the franchise didn't center on one moment, but the incident that stood out involved an arrest for marijuana possession before a game. The situation didn't stay quiet. Police found him in the parking lot, the game clock already ticking down to warm-ups. The Timberwolves scrambled to explain his absence while the broadcast hinted at off-court issues without details. Inside the locker room, teammates had grown used to unpredictable arrivals, but this moment hit differently. Rider was suspended, later reinstated, and still put up 19.3 points that season. His scoring rarely dipped, yet the franchise felt stuck between building around his talent or distancing themselves from the constant turmoil surrounding him. And when he moved to Portland, the pattern followed. Missed practices, late arrivals, and arguments with coaches overshadowed his offense. Even in Atlanta, where he averaged 19.8 points during a brief stretch, the same concerns resurfaced. His production was never the problem. The controversy simply never stopped long enough for a team to trust him for the long term. J.R. Rider's career became the story of a gifted scorer whose athleticism should have put him among the league's elite, but whose most memorable moments came from the turbulence around him rather than the highlights he produced on the court. Javaris Crittenton, a rising guard pulled into a downward spiral. Javaris Crittenton entered the league with the traits teams usually stash for later development: length at the guard position, steady pace, and flashes of scoring that showed up in short bursts. During his best NBA stretch in Memphis, he averaged 10.3 points in 22 minutes, enough to suggest a larger role if things settled. But everything changed the moment he crossed paths with Gilbert Arenas during a dispute that spiraled far beyond basketball. The tension started with a card game argument on a team flight. Most players brushed it off, but Crittenton took the loss personally. When Arenas brought unloaded guns into the locker room days later as a joke, Crittenton responded by showing his own firearm. There were no shots, no violence, just a moment that instantly destroyed careers. The league treated both players harshly. Crittenton's suspension erased the opportunity he was fighting for, and the Wizards quickly moved on. Teams hesitated to sign him afterward, even though his athleticism and defensive instincts still gave him value as a rotation guard. After basketball, things unraveled further. In 2011, Crittenton was linked to a shooting incident in Atlanta that left a woman dead. The case became a national headline, ending with him receiving a 23-year sentence. Crittenton's story became one of the sharpest turns in modern NBA history. A player who once pushed the pace, guarded multiple positions, and showed promise as a slashing scorer ended up defined not by his on-court potential, but by the decisions that pulled him into a path he never escaped. Matt Barnes, the team bus confrontation that went public. Matt Barnes carved out his career through defense, toughness, and a willingness to take matchups most players avoided. During his prime years with Golden State and Orlando, he averaged modest numbers, around 9 points and 5 rebounds, but played with an intensity that coaches trusted in late-game situations. That edge, however, carried him into a controversy that unfolded far from the court. While playing for the Memphis Grizzlies, Barnes became involved in an altercation with former Knicks coach Derek Fisher, who was dating Barnes's estranged wife at the time. The confrontation happened at a private home, not an arena, but the fallout hit the league instantly. Reports circulated that Barnes drove hours to confront Fisher. The details varied depending on the source, but the league still suspended him 2 games for the incident. On the court, Barnes tried to push forward. He averaged 10.0 points that season, which was one of his best scoring years, and remained a dependable defender against wings and stretch forwards. Teammates often praised the same competitive fire that critics pointed to as the root of the controversy. The incident followed him through every stop afterward. Even during his Warriors' return in 2017, where he contributed meaningful minutes during their championship run, the narrative never fully detached itself from that confrontation. Barnes eventually embraced the conversation publicly, discussing the situation on multiple platforms, but the moment still sits as one of the most public off-court conflicts. Think you know all the NBA controversies? Comment below which story shocked you the most, and stick around, because we're just getting started. Hit subscribe and like this video if you're yet to do so. Bonzi Wells, the confrontation that redefined his reputation. Bonzi Wells' game always leaned mostly toward physicality. In Portland, he averaged 12.3 points and 4.7 rebounds, often muscling his way to the rim while defending wings that carried more hype. What happened next wasn't a random controversy. It was a dent that followed him through his career. It all happened during his early Blazers years, when tensions with coach Maurice Cheeks boiled over publicly. The breaking point came in 2003. During a blowout loss, Cheeks pulled Wells from the game after a defensive lapse. Bonzi, frustrated by the benching, exchanged words that were audible enough for cameras to catch his reaction, a visible middle finger gesture directed toward the coach. The moment lasted seconds, but became a headline instantly. Portland didn't hesitate to suspend him, citing conduct detrimental to the team. At the time, the Blazers were already battling the Jail Blazers' reputation, and Wells became one of the faces of that narrative. Even though he was coming off a stretch where he posted 17 points per game, the franchise grew tired of managing off-court tension and traded him shortly after. However, in Memphis, Wells revived his value, especially in the playoffs. During the 2006 postseason run with Sacramento, he delivered one of the most underrated playoff performances of the era, 23.2 points and 12.0 rebounds against San Antonio. Yet even that surge couldn't erase the image that was created in Portland. The controversy became shorthand for his career. His talent remained steady, but the gesture became the snapshot that defined how teams viewed him. Metta World Peace, the elbow heard around the league. Metta World Peace, long known as Ron Artest, played defense with a commitment few wings matched. In Indiana, he averaged 18.3 points while winning the Defensive Player of the Year, proving he wasn't just a stopper, but a legitimate two-way threat. His career carried multiple controversies, but the moment that reignited everything came in 2012 during a seemingly ordinary play. After a big dunk against Oklahoma City, Metta pounded his chest in celebration. As he turned, his elbow swung hard into James Harden's head. Harden dropped instantly, and replays ran non-stop, showing the impact from every angle. The league at first ruled it as a flagrant foul, then upgraded it, issuing a 7-game suspension. The incident reopened old discussions about Metta's volatility, even though years had passed since the infamous brawl in Detroit. At the time of the elbow, he was averaging 12.4 points and holding key defensive assignments for the Lakers. His role was no doubt crucial, and the team felt the suspension immediately. Metta insisted that the hit was accidental, as it was a result of an intense celebration. However, critics saw something else, which they tagged recklessness. What made it controversial wasn't just the force of the elbow, it was how quickly it resurfaced concerns. When he returned, Metta finished the season strong and even had critical moments in the playoffs. Despite all of that, the elbow became one of the most replayed fouls of the decade, and it rubbed off on him for too long. Stephen Jackson, the strip club shooting that shook his career. Steven Jackson spent his career proving he could impact games on both ends. While in Indiana and Golden State, he hovered around 15 to 20 points per night, defended multiple positions, and played with a fearlessness that fit every underdog roster he joined. However, one night in 2006, long before his Warriors' playoff heroics, a moment outside a strip club in Indianapolis reshaped his reputation. Jackson was leaving the club with teammates when an argument in the parking lot escalated. A car accelerated toward him, and in response, Jackson fired several shots into the air with a legal firearm. Although nobody was hit, the scene exploded across national media. The Pacers were already recovering from the malice at the Palace fallout, and this incident reopened wounds the franchise desperately wanted to close. The league suspended Jackson for 7 games. His defensive energy and late-game shot creation were vital at the time. He was averaging 16.4 points, but the Pacers now viewed him as part of the chaos they were trying to escape. A few months later, he was traded. Life moved on for him, and when he arrived in Golden State, the controversy followed, even as he became one of the emotional engines behind the We Believe playoff run. Jackson hit big shots, guarded elite scorers, and averaged 19.9 points in that postseason, proving his value once again. However, the strip club incident stayed attached to his name. Despite his ability and his attempts to rebuild things, the incident stayed glued to his name. O.J. Mayo, the suspension that stalled a promising climb. O.J. Mayo, as a rookie in Memphis, averaged 18.5 points, shot efficiently from mid-range, and carried himself like someone ready for a long career. The turning point came in 2011, when the league announced he'd been suspended after testing positive for a banned substance. The news went viral. Memphis, on the other end, had been building momentum, leaning on Mayo as a scorer off the bench. That season, he averaged 11.3 points, still giving the Grizzlies valuable spacing in lineups that struggled without perimeter threats. After building a solid momentum around him, his suspension, however, threatened the chemistry which the team had worked to secure. Mayo, on the other end, insisted the result of the substance came as a result from an over-the-counter energy drink. The critics didn't buy into his story and doubted him. However, core supporters believed him, and the franchise tried to control the narrative without pushing too hard in either direction. The fallout didn't end with the suspension. Memphis gradually shifted toward a more defensive identity. Mayo's scoring helped, but the franchise moved him away from the role he once considered his own destiny. When he left for Dallas, his value flickered again. He averaged 15.3 points and became their leading scorer. Yet the controversy continued to follow him, shaping how teams evaluated his professionalism. Meanwhile, the final blow came years later, when the NBA handed him a 2-year ban for violating the league's drug policy. That ruling effectively ended his career, and it was a downward trend for him as his professional ability was questioned. Michael Beasley, the rookie program incident that set off alarms. In his second year with Miami, Michael Beasley averaged 14.8 points and 6.4 rebounds, flashing the scoring versatility that made him the number 1-2 pick. But one early incident at the NBA's rookie transition program reshaped the perception which people have of him, long even before his on-court development peaked. The police were called to a hotel after a fire alarm sounded, and when security entered the room, Beasley and teammates Mario Chalmers and Daryl Arthur were inside, along with evidence of marijuana use. Beasley left the room quickly in a bid to distance himself from the incident, but the CCTV in the building later showed his belongings there. The league went on to fine him, sent him to a treatment program, and what happened next reshaped his starting career. The story exploded across media outlets. Miami tried everything in their power to protect him, emphasizing his potential while downplaying the off-court issues. On the floor, Beasley delivered consistent mid-range scoring and averaged double figures in nearly every stop he made. His best stretch came in Minnesota, where he posted 19.2 points per game during the 2010-11 season. But the early controversy followed him everywhere, becoming the lens through which teams assessed any misstep, no matter how small. Even later in his career, when he produced efficient minutes in Houston, Phoenix, and New York, the perception never fully reset. Beasley stayed productive, but his rookie year incident had shaped how the front offices viewed his maturity. Lamar Odom, the episode that pulled him away from basketball. Lamar Odom's versatility made him one of the league's most valuable forwards for over a decade. During the Lakers' championship run, he averaged 14.6 points and 8.9 rebounds, switching between positions effortlessly and filling gaps in lineups built around stars. His game rarely relied on flash. It was a combination of balance, IQ, and adaptability. However, the controversy that shifted his career happened quietly, away from the cameras, and revealed itself all at once. In 2015, Odom was found unconscious at a Nevada brothel. The details were overwhelming. Reports mentioned drugs, a medical emergency, and a long recovery process. However, none of it connected to basketball, yet the story became unavoidable. Teams, fans, and even former teammates all watched updates come in, unsure how far the situation would spiral. Before the incident, Odom had already struggled to find stability. His numbers dipped devastatingly in Dallas, and again during his second Clippers stint, though he still averaged 8 rebounds and contributed defensively. The off-court issues, however, increasingly overshadowed his production. When the Nevada incident hit the news, it didn't feel like a sudden shock. It felt like a culmination of problems he'd never fully escaped. Odom was able to survive, but the episode ended any remaining hope of an NBA return. Just as you already know that the league moves like the speed of light, the league no longer viewed him as a versatile veteran. He became a cautionary story about personal battles overshadowing professional legacy. Odom's career remains respected. Sixth Man of the Year, 2 titles, years of consistent production, but the controversy sits directly beside his accomplishments. It was a complex situation, which he had to deal with in his career. If you're loving these underrated player stories, check out the playlist in the top right for more crazy NBA moments you probably never heard about. And don't forget to smash the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. This next player story is bizarre. Nick Young, the hacked phone incident that broke a locker room. Nick Young's shot selection didn't always match the scouting report, but he figured how to deliver streaks of scoring that energized benches. During the 2013-14 season with the Lakers, he averaged 17.9 points, one of the best stretches of his career. Just like the previous mentioned players, Young slipped into a controversy that defined him, although this didn't happen on the court. The incident began with a leaked recording, a private conversation which surfaced online, filmed by a teammate, revealing personal details about Young's relationship. The video spread quickly, turning what should have been an internal moment into a national story. Fans got divided as they debated who was at fault, but the real damage hit inside the locker room. The leaked recording caused a trust collapse. The players were not left out, as they chose sides, leadership questioned motives, and the season, which was already difficult, became heavier for everyone involved. Young tried to focus on basketball, but his efficiency dipped afterward. Defensive matchups targeted him, and his shooting percentage fell from earlier in the year. The narrative shifted from his scoring ability to the fractured dynamic in the locker room. The teammate who filmed the video became the focus of criticism, but Young absorbed most of the fallout. The controversy didn't define his entire career, as he later won a championship with Golden State, shooting nearly 38% from 3 in a reduced role. But the incident marked the turning point for him. It demonstrated how off-court exposure, even unrelated to basketball, could influence a player's rhythm, chemistry, and reputation. Young's personal privacy collided with team culture, and his career never fully escaped the shadow that video left behind. Kermit Washington, the punch that altered 2 careers. Kermit Washington wasn't a star, but he carved out a role as a physical interior defender. During the 1977-78 season, he averaged 11.5 points and 11.2 rebounds, giving the Lakers toughness near the rim. But his name became tied to one of the most controversial moments in NBA history, a single punch that changed multiple careers. The incident occurred during a December game against Houston. A scuffle started near the basket. Players rushed in, momentum carried bodies into one another, and Washington turned toward what he thought was an opponent confronting him. Instead, he struck Rudy Tomjanovich, who was sprinting in to break up the fight. The punch was immediate and devastating. Tomjanovich fell instantly, suffering severe facial and skull injuries. Immediately, the arena went silent. Washington insisted he reacted instinctively, not maliciously, but the impact of the moment overshadowed his intent. The league suspended him for 60 days. It was considered as one of the longest at the time. His averages remained solid afterward, including a season in Portland, with 13.4 points and 10.5 rebounds, but public perception never recovered. Tomljanovic, on the other hand, survived but required significant recovery time. The controversy reshaped NBA policies on fighting, spacing, and bench reactions. Washington, despite maintaining consistent production, became permanently linked to an incident he struggled to move past. He continued playing for several seasons, yet the shadow of that punch followed him everywhere, like a footprint. The crowds didn't spare him as they booed him. Franchises avoided long commitments, and commentators referenced the moment anytime his name came up. Washington's career didn't end that night, but the trajectory shifted instantly. One moment of chaos became the defining story of a player who otherwise built his career on steady, physical basketball. Delonte West, the traffic stop discovery that changed everything. In Cleveland, Delonte West averaged 11.7 points and 3.5 assists, fitting perfectly next to ball-dominant stars by defending multiple positions and hitting timely shots. The most controversial moment for West came far from a basketball court. It all happened during a traffic stop that shifted public perception overnight. In 2009, police pulled him over for a routine violation. What they found in the vehicle ignited instant headlines: multiple firearms, including one stored inside a guitar case. The story spread quickly, and within hours, West's steady reputation dissolved into a national discussion about safety, responsibility, and his mental health. The league responded by monitoring the situation closely, and the Cavaliers tried to keep the focus on basketball. On the court, West still produced efficient minutes, shooting over 45% that season and remaining a reliable defender, but the cloud around the incident never lifted. Teams considering long-term commitments hesitated. They were unsure of how to separate the off-court controversy from his on-court value. However, when he moved to Dallas later in his career, he showed flashes of the same defensive energy and mid-range control, averaging 9.6 points in his best stretch there. But by then, the narrative was already fixed, and every minor issue became magnified, as it was seen through the lens of the traffic stop incident. Chris Washburn, talent lost to personal struggles. Chris Washburn entered the NBA in 1986 as a highly touted rookie, picked third overall by the Golden State Warriors. Standing 6 feet 11 inches with agility unusual for a center, he averaged 7.3 points and 4.6 rebounds as a rookie, showing flashes of the game-changing presence scouts had envisioned. But off-court issues became a problem that defined him more than his on-court performance. During his rookie year, whispers of drug use circulated as he failed multiple NBA-administered drug tests, prompting league warnings and team suspensions. The Warriors attempted to provide guidance, but Washburn's personal challenges overwhelmed both him and the franchise. By his second season, he was suspended multiple times, and his production plummeted, averaging barely 4.2 points per game in limited minutes. The controversy didn't stay private, as media coverage portrayed him as a cautionary tale, a highly talented athlete whose career unraveled before it could begin. Teams avoided signing him long-term, and by 1990, Washburn was out of the league. Despite the potential that was evident in his rookie season, blocking shots, moving fluidly on pick and rolls, and handling the ball like a guard, his name became synonymous with lost promise. Washburn's story has been passed down through the years, not for dominance or championships, but for the abrupt collision of talent with off-court challenges, a stark reminder of how personal struggles can derail even the most promising careers. Bobby Simmons, scoring talent. Overshadowed by controversy? Bobby Simmons wasn't a household name, but his scoring ability made him a standout in his prime. During his 2005 to 2006 season with Milwaukee, he averaged 16.4 points per game, shooting efficiently from mid-range and contributing as a versatile forward. Yet the most controversial moment of his career unfolded off the court, and it briefly threatened his trajectory. In 2007, Simmons was involved in a car accident linked to a minor DUI. The incident became public quickly, and media coverage questioned his professionalism and reliability. Though no serious injuries occurred, the timing overshadowed his performance. At the time, he had just helped the Bucks stretch playoff aspirations, and coaches had relied on him to provide scoring bursts off the bench, but everything went down the drain. The team responded with fines and a temporary reduction in minutes. Despite this, Simmons maintained his offensive output, shooting over 43% from three during that stretch, proving his talent hadn't disappeared. Despite his potential, the narrative around him shifted, and front offices began evaluating him less for his scoring and more for potential off-court distractions. He bounced around the league afterward, producing solid numbers in Chicago and Sacramento, but the early controversy followed him. Teams increasingly hesitated to invest on a long-term base with him, and what could have been a quiet, productive career became punctuated by a single off-court misstep. Anthony Bennett, from number 1 pick to public debate. Anthony Bennett entered the NBA with sky-high expectations. Selected number 1 overall in 2013 by Cleveland, he had impressed in college with 16.1 points and 8.1 rebounds per game at UNLV, showing physicality, shooting touch, and rebounding instincts unusual for his position. Despite all of these, his NBA career became one of the most controversial in recent history, not for misbehavior, but for the massive gap between potential and production. From the start, Bennett struggled with injuries and conditioning issues that limited him to 4.2 points and 3.0 rebounds per game in his rookie season. Teams questioned whether he had the mental and physical readiness to handle the pressure of a top pick. Every missed shot and every slow transition became fodder for a national debate. Analysts were not left out as they debated whether Cleveland had made a mistake, while fans online dissected every highlight and every stat line. Bennett bounced between teams quickly, Minnesota, Toronto, Brooklyn, never finding consistency. Even when he posted brief flashes, such as 17 points in a single game for the Timberwolves, the narrative remained dominated by what he hadn't yet delivered. The league was hostile towards him, and the media framed him as a non-bankable player. Despite all of these, insiders often pointed out his work ethic and professionalism, contrasting the public perception. The controversy wasn't scandalous or criminal, it was the scrutiny that comes with being a number 1 pick. Bennett's story underscores how expectation can be as punishing as failure. Bennett continued to play professionally overseas and in the G League, quietly rebuilding his game. But in NBA history, his name is forever tied to one of the biggest debates about drafting, player development, and the pressures of instant judgment: Brandon Roy, the superstar that never got his tomorrow. Brandon Roy's story is one of the most heartbreaking what-ifs in NBA history. A superstar built for greatness, robbed of a long career before he even hit his true peak. Roy wasn't that flashy player, neither was he loud. He was smooth, controlled, and frighteningly reliable. In just his second year, he averaged 19.1 points, 5.8 assists, and 4.7 rebounds, earning the 2007-08 Most Improved Player award and instantly becoming the Blazers' franchise cornerstone. By year 3, he was a full-blown killer with 22.6 points per game, 3 straight All-Star selections, and countless clutch moments that made Portland fans believe they finally had their next big legend after Clyde Drexler. Then a tragedy came knocking. His knees aged faster than the rest of him. A degenerative cartilage. He was always complaining of sharp pain during warm-ups, which ended up causing him minutes restrictions. He went on for surgeries, but it took longer to heal each time, and this made both the team and fans worried. Roy went from dropping 52 points in a single game to struggling just to jog without discomfort. Despite all of these, he never lost his heart. His legendary 18 points in 4 minutes during the 2011 playoffs remains one of the most iconic single-man comebacks in NBA history, a final reminder of the superstar he truly was. But no matter how hard he fought, his knees had already made the final call. At just 27 years old, Brandon Roy had to walk away from the league. A star who never faded, he was simply taken just too soon. There you have it. 20 most controversial things that happened in the history of the NBA. Don't you forget, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, smash this button right here and give this video a thumbs up so others can see the video on here.